The sun was setting as Sergeant Manuel Ortega drove his old blue Honda Civic down the winding road that led away from Fort Carson Military Base. After 14 hours of coordinating training exercises, all he wanted was a hot meal and his bed. His uniform was neatly hung in the back seat, and he wore a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. The radio played softly in the background, some country song about coming home. Manuel rolled down the window, letting the cool evening air wash over his face. At 42, he had the kind of weathered face that told stories without words, 20 years of military service etched into the lines around his eyes. He hummed along to the music, thinking about the phone call he needed to make to his mother in New Mexico. She always worried, even though her son was thousands of miles from any war zone these days. The flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror caught him by surprise. Manuel checked his speedometer. He was going exactly 5 miles under the limit. Years of military discipline had made following rules second nature. He signaled and pulled over to the shoulder, the gravel crunching under his tires. "Wonder what this is about," he muttered to himself, reaching for his wallet where he kept his license and military ID. Through his side mirror, he watched 2 officers step out of their patrol car. Something about their posture put him on edge. They approached with hands hovering near their holsters, as if expecting trouble. Manuel kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, the way his father had taught him years ago. "Always let them see your hands, mijo," his dad had said after Manuel got his first car. "It's just how things are for people like us." The taller officer tapped on the window with his flashlight. Manuel pressed the button to lower it completely. "Evening, officers. What seems to be the problem?" The officer shone his light directly into Manuel's face, then around the inside of the car. "License and registration, no explanation, no greeting, just a demand." Manuel nodded slowly. "My registration is in the glove compartment and my wallet is in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for them now, okay?" The second officer, shorter with a buzz cut, stepped closer. "Your vehicle matches the description of one involved in an incident earlier today." Manuel handed over his license and military ID along with the registration. "I've been on base all day, sir. I'm just heading home now." The tall officer examined the ID, turning it over in his hands. "Army, huh? This doesn't look like a standard military ID. It's a chief warrant officer ID, sir. I've been in service for 20 years. The officers exchanged glances. The shorter one spoke into his radio, stepping away slightly. Manuel caught fragments. "Hispanic male, claims military, need to verify." Manuel felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He'd been here before in small towns near bases across America. Some things never changed, no matter how many medals you earned. "Step out of the vehicle, please," the taller officer said, handing back the documents. "May I ask why, officer? I've provided identification and—" "Step out of the vehicle now." The officer's hand moved to his holster. Manuel took a deep breath. He thought about arguing, about calling his commanding officer, about the unfairness of it all. But 20 years in the Army had taught him when to pick his battles. This wasn't the time or place. "Yes, sir," he said, carefully opening his door and stepping out. The evening had grown chilly and goosebumps rose on his arms. Or maybe that was the adrenaline. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle." Manuel complied, feeling the cool metal of his car under his palms. "Officers, I'd like to understand what's happening." "What incident are you referring to?" There was a shoplifting at the convenience store in town. Suspect was a Hispanic male in a blue Honda. The shorter officer began patting him down while the taller one watched. Manuel stared straight ahead. There must be hundreds of blue Hondas in this county. And with all due respect, Hispanic male describes a lot of people. A car drove by slowly, the driver craning their neck to see what was happening. Manuel felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He'd led troops into combat, coordinated complex military operations, received commendations from generals, and here he was, being treated like a criminal because of his skin color and the car he drove. "We're just doing our job." "Sir," said the taller officer, emphasizing the "sir" in a way that stripped it of all respect. "If you've got nothing to hide, this won't take long." The shorter officer finished the pat-down and stepped back. "Clean." "I'd like to search your vehicle now," the taller officer said. Manuel turned around slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. "Do you have probable cause for a search, officer? Or a warrant?" The question clearly irritated them. The taller officer stepped closer, invading Manuel's personal space. You refusing to cooperate? No, sir. I'm exercising my constitutional rights. The same constitution I've sworn to defend for the past 20 years. Manuel kept his voice level, professional, the same tone he used when addressing junior officers who'd made a mistake. More cars were slowing down now. A red pickup truck pulled over across the road, and a young woman stepped out with her phone raised, clearly recording. Manuel wished she wouldn't. This situation was volatile enough without an audience. Listen here, the shorter officer said, stepping forward. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Manuel thought about his options. He could comply, let them search his car without cause, swallow his pride and dignity yet again. Or he could stand his ground, knowing it might make things worse. A memory flashed through his mind. His father, proud but quiet, being made to empty his pockets outside their neighborhood grocery store when Manuel was just a boy. The shame in his father's eyes, even though he'd done nothing wrong. I respectfully declined to consent to a search without probable cause, Manuel said quietly, but I'm happy to cooperate in any other way. The officers exchanged glances again. The taller one pulled out his handcuffs. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Am I under arrest? Manuel asked, his heart pounding. You're being detained while we investigate. More cars were stopping now. Phones recording. Manuel thought about his mother seeing this on social media, about his commanding officer, about the young soldiers who looked up to him. As the cold metal of the handcuffs closed around his wrists, Manuel noticed a military police vehicle slowing down on the other side of the road. The driver, a young corporal he recognized from the base, did a double take upon seeing him. The vehicle quickly made a U-turn and sped off. I'd like to make a phone call, Manuel said as they led him toward the patrol car. You can make all the calls you want once we're done here, the taller officer said, opening the back door. As Manuel was about to be placed in the car, the police radio crackled to life. The dispatcher's voice came through clearly. All units be advised, incoming call from Fort Carson Military Command regarding your current stop. They're requesting to speak with the officers on scene immediately. The officers froze, looking at each other. Manuel said nothing, but inside, for the first time since the lights had flashed in his mirror, he felt a small measure of relief. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn. The shorter officer picked up the radio, hesitation evident in his voice. This is Officer Reynolds. Go ahead. What came next would change everything, but in that moment, standing in handcuffs on the side of the road, Manuel Ortega wasn't thinking about justice or retribution. He was thinking about all the other men who looked like him who didn't have a military command to call, who didn't have phones recording their encounters, who had no one to intervene when the lights flashed in their mirrors, and he decided whatever happened next, he would make it count for all of them too. The police radio crackled with static before a stern voice came through. This is Colonel Richard Winters, Fort Carson Base Commander. Who am I speaking with? Officer Reynolds glanced at his partner, confusion washing over his face. This is Officer Reynolds with Deputy Henderson, Pine Creek PD. What can I do for you, sir? You can start by explaining why you've detained Chief Warrant Officer Manuel Ortega. The air seemed to freeze around them. Manuel stood quietly by the patrol car, still handcuffed but with a slight straightening of his posture at the mention of his rank. We're conducting an investigation, sir. The vehicle matches. I'm well aware of what you think you're doing, the colonel cut in. What you are actually doing is detaining one of the most respected officers on this base without cause. Chief Ortega oversees critical training operations and has clearance levels you can't begin to comprehend. Officer Henderson stepped away from the patrol car, suddenly interested in the gathering crowd of onlookers. The young woman with the phone was still recording, and now she had been joined by others. Sir, we're following protocol for release him immediately and return his belongings. I'm sending the base legal officer to your location. Do not leave the scene. Manuel watched the change in the officers' faces, the slow drain of authority, the creeping realization that they had made a serious miscalculation. Henderson walked over and unlocked the handcuffs without meeting Manuel's eyes. Sorry for the confusion, sir, he muttered. The sir now waited with genuine deference. Manuel rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had dug into his skin. Thank you, he said simply, his voice betraying no anger or satisfaction. Reynolds handed back Manuel's wallet and keys, his earlier confidence deflated. You're free to go, sir. We apologize for the inconvenience. Is the investigation concluded then? Manuel asked. What happened to the blue Honda and the Hispanic male suspect you were looking for? The question hung in the air unanswered. Both officers seemed suddenly fascinated by their boots. A military police vehicle pulled up behind the growing line of civilian cars. Two MPs in uniform stepped out, followed by a woman in a crisp service uniform with captain's bars on her shoulders. Even from a distance, Manuel could see the legal insignia. Chief Ortega, she called, walking briskly toward them. Captain Chen, base legal, are you all right, sir? I'm fine, Captain, Manuel replied, though the slight tremor in his hand suggested otherwise. Captain Chen turned to the police officers, her expression professional but cold. Officers, I need your badge numbers and a full account of this stop. Colonel Winters has requested a complete report. The crowd had grown larger. Some people were taking photos, others talking in hushed tones. Manuel noticed a news van pulling up down the road. This was becoming exactly what he didn't want, a spectacle. Captain, he said quietly, perhaps we could continue this at the station rather than roadside. Chen nodded, understanding his desire for privacy. Of course, sir. She turned back to the officers. We'll continue this discussion at your department. I expect you both to report directly to your commanding officer about this incident. Reynolds nodded stiffly. Yes, ma'am. As the officers returned to their patrol car, Manuel turned to face the crowd. He saw anger in some faces, curiosity in others. The young woman who had first stopped to record approached cautiously. Sir, I got everything on video. Would you like me to send it to you? For evidence? Manuel considered the offer. Part of him wanted to say no, to put this whole unpleasant business behind him. But another part, the part that remembered his father, that thought of his young Latino soldiers who might face similar situations, made him nod. Thank you. That would be helpful. He gave her his work email. She smiled, a flash of unexpected brightness in the tense atmosphere. My brother's in the army too. I couldn't just drive by when I saw what was happening. The MPs escorted Manuel to their vehicle, offering to drive him home or back to base. Manuel glanced at his Honda still parked by the roadside. I can drive myself, thank you. I'd like to follow Captain Chen to the police station and get this sorted out tonight. One of the MPs nodded. We'll escort you, sir. As Manuel walked back to his car, he noticed how differently he moved now, hyper-aware of each gesture, conscious of the eyes watching him. The indignity of being handcuffed in public had left an invisible mark, one that wouldn't fade with the red lines on his wrists. Inside his car, with the door closed, Manuel finally allowed himself a moment of reaction. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, took one deep breath, then another. 20 years of military discipline had taught him to compartmentalize, to push emotions aside until the mission was complete. But this hadn't been a mission. This had been personal. His phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Winters. Ortega, call me when you're done at the station. We need to talk about this. Manuel started his car and followed the MP vehicle toward town, the police cruiser trailing behind. The procession felt oddly ceremonial, as if his humiliation and subsequent vindication needed witnesses. At the Pine Creek police station, the atmosphere was tense. Word had spread quickly and the desk sergeant couldn't meet Manuel's eyes as he signed in. Captain Chen requested a private room, which was granted immediately. Chief Ortega, she said once they were seated, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. From the beginning, Manuel recounted the events calmly, methodically, the way he would deliver an after-action report. He stated facts without embellishment. The initial stop, the officer's demeanor, his request for probable cause, the handcuffing. Captain Chen took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. And at any point did they specifically mention your ethnicity? Not directly, Manuel replied. But the description they claimed to be looking for was Hispanic male in a blue Honda. That's about as specific as saying white guy in a pickup truck around here. She nodded. Understanding the implication, Chief, you should know that Colonel Winters is extremely displeased. There will likely be formal complaints filed with the department and possibly the mayor's office. Manuel leaned back in his chair, considering this. I understand. But I'm not interested in creating a larger controversy. With all due respect, sir, this isn't just about you. This kind of profiling affects the entire military community, especially our minority service members. Before Manuel could respond, there was a knock at the door. The police chief, a gray-haired man with deep-set eyes, entered with Reynolds and Henderson trailing behind him. Chief Ortega, Captain Chen, he greeted them, his expression grave. "I'm Police Chief Tom Baker. I want to personally apologize for this incident." Manuel nodded but said nothing, waiting. "My officers informed me that there was a misunderstanding regarding a shoplifting suspect. However, after reviewing the initial call, it appears the actual description was for a young male, possibly Hispanic, in a dark blue compact car. Officer Reynolds admits he may have been overzealous in his approach." Reynolds stared at the wall, jaw tight. Henderson at least had the decency to look ashamed. "A misunderstanding," Manuel repeated, the words hollow. "And the handcuffs? The attempted illegal search? Were those misunderstandings too?" Chief Baker sighed. "Those actions were not in line with department policy. I assure you there will be consequences." Captain Chen closed her notebook. "We'll need copies of all relevant reports, body camera footage, and dispatch recordings." "Of course," Baker agreed quickly. "Full transparency." Manuel stood up suddenly, surprising everyone. "I'd like to speak with the officers alone." Baker hesitated, then nodded. "Take as much time as you need." He and Captain Chen left the room, closing the door behind them. For a long moment, Manuel simply looked at the two men who had handcuffed him on the side of the road. Reynolds remained defiant, chin raised. Henderson couldn't maintain eye contact. "I'm not here to yell at you," Manuel finally said. "I want you to understand something. When you pulled me over tonight, you didn't see Chief Warrant Officer Manuel Ortega with 20 years of service. You didn't see the medals or the commendations. You didn't see the men I've led or the missions I've completed." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You saw a Hispanic man in a car that matched a vague description, and you made assumptions. Those assumptions could have escalated into something much worse." Henderson swallowed hard. "Sir, Manuel held up his hand. "I'm not finished. Tomorrow I have to go back to base and lead soldiers, some of whom look like me, some who look like you. I have to be their example. How do you think they'll feel when they hear about this?" Reynolds finally spoke, his voice tight. "We were doing our job." "Your job is to protect and serve everyone in this community," Manuel replied calmly. "Including those who don't look like you. Including me." He walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "I don't want your badges or your jobs. I want you to do better. Because next time it might not be someone with a colonel on speed dial." As he left the room, Manuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Whatever happened next, the reports, the possible legal action, the inevitable media attention, he had said his piece to the men who needed to hear it most, and in that moment, that was enough. The drive back to base felt longer than usual. Manuel followed the MP's vehicle, his mind replaying the events of the evening like a movie he couldn't turn off. The handcuffs, the stares from passing cars, the young woman recording with her phone, the sudden shift in the officers' attitudes when they learned who he really was. Who he really was. The phrase stuck in his mind, as if his uniform and rank made him more worthy of respect than any other person. It was nearly midnight when he pulled into his assigned parking spot on base. Captain Chen had insisted on following him back, probably under orders from Colonel Winters. She parked beside him and rolled down her window. "The Colonel wants to see you first thing tomorrow's 0700 hours, she said. "He's taking this very seriously." Manuel nodded. "Thank you, Captain. For everything tonight," she offered a small smile. "Just doing my job, Chief. Get some rest." Rest seemed unlikely. Manuel entered his quarters, a modest but comfortable apartment in the officers' housing block, and dropped his keys on the kitchen counter. His phone had been buzzing with messages since he left the police station, but he hadn't checked any of them. Now, sitting on the edge of his bed, he scrolled through the notifications. 3 missed calls from his mother, a dozen text messages from fellow officers who had somehow already heard about the incident, an email from a local news reporter requesting a statement, and most surprising of all, a voicemail from the mayor of Pine Creek. "Chief Ortega, this is Mayor Wilson. I've been briefed on tonight's unfortunate incident. Please call me at your earliest convenience. My direct line is..." Manuel deleted the message without writing down the number. Whatever political damage control the mayor wanted to do could wait. He had more immediate concerns. He called his mother. "Mijo!" Her voice, warm and worried, filled his ear. "I got a call from Lucia's boy who works at the base. He said you were arrested. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mama, he assured her, rubbing his forehead. I wasn't arrested, just detained briefly. It was a misunderstanding. The lie tasted bitter, but he couldn't bring himself to worry her with the truth. At 76, Rosa Ortega had seen enough of how the world treated her family. You sure? You don't sound fine. Manuel smiled despite himself. She could always tell, just tired, Mama, long day. I'll call you tomorrow with the whole story, okay? After promising to eat a proper breakfast and saying goodnight, Manuel hung up and headed for the shower. He stood under the hot water for a long time, letting it wash away the tension in his shoulders, if not the memory of the evening. Morning came too quickly. Manuel woke before his alarm, dressed carefully in his full uniform, making sure every ribbon and medal was perfectly aligned. Today he needed the armor they provided, not against bullets, but against judgment. The base was buzzing with activity as he walked to the command building. He could feel eyes following him, hear the whispers that paused when he got too close. Word had spread fast. Colonel Winters was waiting in his office, along with Captain Chen and a man Manuel didn't recognize. Tall, African-American, in an expensive suit that screamed government official. Chief Ortega, Winters said, standing to shake his hand. How are you holding up? I'm fine, sir, Manuel replied automatically. Winters gestured to the stranger. This is Anthony Washington, Department of Defense Civil Rights Division. He flew in this morning. Washington extended his hand. Chief Ortega, wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Manuel shook it, surprised. DOD Civil Rights? Sir, with all due respect, I think this is being blown out of proportion. Winters motioned for everyone to sit. Manuel, I've known you for 8 years now? In all that time, I've never seen you make a fuss about anything. You've handled everything from budget cuts to deployment extensions without complaint. He leaned forward, hands clasped on his desk. But this isn't about you being a good soldier. This is about what's right. Washington opened a leather portfolio. We've reviewed the preliminary reports and witness statements. Captain Chen has been very thorough. The body camera footage from both officers has been secured, and frankly, it's damning. The Pine Creek Police Department has a history, Winters added. 3 complaints in the last year alone about profiling. All swept under the rug. Manuel shifted uncomfortably. Sir, my concern is that this could damage relations between the base and the local community. We depend on each other. That's precisely why this needs to be addressed, Washington said. Real relationships can't be built on ignored injustices, Captain Chen spoke up. Chief Ortega, the young woman who recorded the incident, posted a partial video online last night. It's already got over 50,000 views. Manuel closed his eyes briefly. That explained the email from the reporter. What exactly are you proposing? He asked, looking between Washington and the colonel. The department is prepared to file a civil rights complaint against the Pine Creek PD, Washington explained. Not just for your incident, but as part of a pattern of behavior. Your case would be the most recent example. And if I don't want to be an example, Winters sighed. That's your right. But think about the other service members who might face similar treatment. Think about your own men, the words hit home. Manuel thought about Private Gonzalez, barely 20, who sent most of his pay home to his mother in Arizona. About Specialist Reyes, whose brother had been pulled over 17 times in 1 year, without a single ticket. About Staff Sergeant Chen, no relation to the captain who was born in California but still got asked where he was really from. I need time to think, Manuel said finally. Of course, Winters nodded. But there's something else you should know. Mayor Wilson called me personally at 5 this morning. They want to offer a formal apology. Publicly. Manuel raised an eyebrow. Damage control. Probably, Washington agreed. But it also means they're scared. They know they messed up. As Manuel left the meeting, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the message made the sender clear. Chief Ortega, Mayor Wilson again. Please call. The situation is escalating. Instead of calling, Manuel headed to the base gym. He needed to think, and physical activity had always cleared his head. The gym was nearly empty at this hour. Just a few soldiers running on treadmills, too focused on their own workouts to notice him. He wrapped his hands carefully and approached a heavy bag. Each punch helped organize his thoughts. Each impact clarified the decision he needed to make. Halfway through his workout, the gym door opened and Colonel Winters walked in, now dressed in PT gear. Thought I might find you here, he said, holding the bag steady as Manuel continued to punch. You always did prefer solving problems with sweat. Manuel landed a particularly hard right hook. Better than the alternatives. They were quiet for a moment. The only sound the rhythmic thud of gloves against leather. You know, Winters said finally, when I got that call from Corporal Jenkins last night, saying he saw you being handcuffed on the side of the road, my first thought wasn't about the legal implications or the PR nightmare. Manuel paused, breathing hard. My first thought was, that could have been me. Winters, a black man in his 50s, met Manuel's eyes. 20 years in uniform, and neither of us is immune to being seen as a threat first, a person second. Manuel unwrapped his hand slowly. What would you do, sir? If you were in my position? Winters considered this. I'd remember that sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight for ourselves. As they walked out of the gym together, Manuel's phone rang again. This time it was Captain Chen. Chief, you need to see this, she said, her voice urgent. The full body camera footage was leaked online an hour ago. It's everywhere. Manuel's stomach dropped. How bad? Bad enough that Officer Reynolds has been suspended pending investigation, and Henderson is on administrative leave. The mayor is holding a press conference at noon. As Manuel hurried back to his quarters to shower and change, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. More reporters, more officials, more people wanting a piece of the story. But one message stood out. A text from the young woman who had stopped to record the incident. Just saw the body cam footage. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Thank you for your service, for real. It was that message more than anything else that helped Manuel make his decision. By the time he was dressed in his Class A uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, he knew exactly what he needed to do. He called Colonel Winters. Sir, about the mayor's press conference. I'd like to be there. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You sure about that? It's going to be a circus. I'm sure, Manuel said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. But I have some conditions. As he laid out his terms, Manuel felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. This wasn't what he had planned for his career. This wasn't a battle he had chosen. But sometimes leadership meant standing up when it would be easier to stay silent. By the time he hung up, the path forward was clear. Whatever happened next, he would face it the same way he had faced everything in his 20 years of service, with dignity, with purpose, and with the knowledge that his actions might make the road a little smoother for those who came after him. The Pine Creek Town Hall was swarming with people by the time Manuel arrived. News vans lined the street, reporters clutched microphones, and a crowd of civilians and uniformed military personnel gathered on the steps. Manuel sat in Colonel Winters' car, watching through the tinted windows. Quite the turnout, Winters remarked. You ready for this? Manuel straightened his tie, a habit from decades of military precision. As ready as I'll ever be, sir. Washington from the DoD Civil Rights Division turned from the front passenger seat. Remember, you don't have to speak if you don't want to. Your presence alone makes a statement. Manuel nodded, but he knew he wouldn't stay silent. The words he'd rehearsed that morning were ready. They exited the car and immediately cameras turned in their direction. Manuel heard the rapid-fire clicks of photographers, saw the boom mics swinging toward him. He kept his eyes forward, walking with the same purposeful stride that had carried him through war zones and military ceremonies alike. Inside the town hall, Mayor Wilson was waiting in a small room off the main chamber. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the nervous energy of someone whose political future suddenly seemed precarious. Chief Ortega, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. I can't tell you how sorry I am about this incident. Manuel shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. We've prepared a statement, the mayor continued, gesturing to a young aide who held several pages of typed text. And, of course, Police Chief Baker will be issuing a formal apology on behalf of the department. And the officers? Manuel asked. The mayor hesitated. Officer Reynolds has been suspended pending investigation. Officer Henderson is on administrative leave. There will be a full review of their conduct. And the other complaints? The ones that came before mine? Mayor Wilson blinked, clearly surprised by the question. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Colonel Winters stepped forward. The 3 formal complaints filed against your department in the past year for racial profiling. All dismissed without proper investigation. The mayor's face tightened. Those were handled according to department protocol. That's the problem, Washington said, his deep voice filling the small room. Your protocol seems designed to bury these incidents, not address them. Before the mayor could respond, Chief Baker entered, looking tired and strained. He nodded to Manuel. Good to see you again, Chief Ortega. You as well, Manuel replied, though the circumstances were hardly good. An aide poked her head in. 2 minutes, Mr. Mayor. As they filed out toward the main chamber, Manuel caught Baker's arm. The young woman who recorded the incident. Is she here? Baker looked surprised. I believe so. She's become something of a local hero since the body cam footage leaked. Manuel nodded. I'd like to speak with her afterward. The main chamber was packed. Rows of chairs filled with reporters, community members, and uniformed officers from both the police department and the military base. Manuel spotted Captain Chen near the front, sitting beside several of his own soldiers who must have come to show support. Mayor Wilson approached the podium first, clearing his throat into the microphone. Camera flashes strobed across the room. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began, his politician's voice smoothing over the tension in the room. As many of you know, an unfortunate incident occurred 2 nights ago involving a decorated military officer from Fort Carson and 2 of our police officers. Manuel listened as the mayor delivered his carefully worded statement, noting how he avoided words like racial profiling or discrimination, instead repeatedly referring to the regrettable misunderstanding. Chief Baker spoke next, his approach more direct. The actions taken by our officers did not meet the standards we set for ourselves as a department, he admitted. We are implementing immediate retraining on proper stop procedures and unconscious bias awareness. Manuel heard murmurs in the crowd. Some supportive, some skeptical. He caught fragments. Too little, too late, and what about the other times? When it was his turn to approach the podium, Manuel felt a sudden wave of uncertainty. He was a soldier, not a public speaker, but then he remembered his father's words from long ago. Stand straight and speak true, mijo. That's all a man can do. The room fell silent as he adjusted the microphone. My name is Chief Warrant Officer Manuel Ortega, he began, his voice steady. For 20 years, I've served this country in the United States Army. I've led troops in combat, trained hundreds of soldiers, and worked to keep our nation safe. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. 2 nights ago, I was driving home from base when I was pulled over. I was handcuffed on the side of the road, not because of anything I had done, but because I matched a vague description, Hispanic male in a blue Honda. Manuel could feel the tension in the room, see the discomfort on some faces and the sad recognition on others. I'm not here to villainize the officers involved. They're part of a system that needs changing. I'm not here to demand punishments or make threats. That's not my purpose today. He gripped the edges of the podium. I'm here because what happened to me happens to people across this country every day. The difference is most don't have a colonel to call. Most don't have body camera footage that goes viral. Most don't get a town hall meeting and public apologies. In the third row, Manuel spotted the young woman who had stopped to record the incident. She nodded slightly encouragingly. I wear this uniform with pride, he continued, but I shouldn't need it to be treated with basic dignity and respect. None of us should. He looked directly at Chief Baker. The Pine Creek Police Department has an opportunity here, not just to apologize, but to lead, to set an example of what real community policing can look like, to build trust with all the people you serve, regardless of what they look like or what car they drive. Manuel pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I've drafted a proposal for a joint training initiative between Fort Carson and the Pine Creek Police Department. Colonel Winters has approved it from the military side. The program would bring officers onto the base for regular interactions with service members of all backgrounds. It would create a community advisory board with actual oversight power, and it would establish a transparent review process for all civilian complaints. He handed the paper to Chief Baker, who took it with visible surprise. This isn't just about making amends for one incident, Manuel said, turning back to the audience. It's about building something better for the future. The room erupted in applause. Manuel saw Captain Chen nodding approvingly. His soldiers were on their feet. Even some of the police officers were clapping. Mayor Wilson quickly retook the podium, eager to associate himself with the positive response. Chief Ortega's proposal sounds excellent. We'll review it immediately and work to implement these changes as quickly as possible. As the formal press conference ended and reporters began shouting questions, Manuel stepped away from the podium. Washington clapped him on the shoulder. "Well done," he said quietly. "Very well done indeed." The young woman who had recorded the incident made her way through the crowd toward him. Up close, Manuel could see she was younger than he'd thought, maybe early 20s with determined eyes. "Chief Ortega," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Lucia Diaz. My brother Carlos serves under you at Fort Carson." Manuel shook her hand, suddenly placing her. "Staff Sergeant Diaz's sister. He's mentioned you. You're in law school, right?" She nodded, smiling. "That's why I stopped that night. I've been studying civil rights law." I knew what they were doing wasn't right. "Your video made a difference," Manuel told her. "Thank you for having the courage to stop." "I just did what anyone should do," she replied. "But not everyone would. That's the problem, isn't it?" Before Manuel could respond, they were interrupted by an unexpected figure pushing through the crowd. Officer Henderson, still in uniform despite his administrative leave. The room quieted as he approached Manuel. Captain Chen moved closer, protective, but Manuel gestured for her to wait. Henderson stopped a few feet away, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "Chief Ortega," he said, his voice just loud enough to be heard by those nearby. "I wanted to speak with you, privately if possible." Manuel considered the request, then nodded. "Outside." They walked together through the crowd, which parted silently to let them pass. Outside on the town hall steps, the afternoon sun was bright, a stark contrast to the tension of the moment. "I've been thinking about what you said," Henderson began, looking at the ground. "At the station, about doing better." Manuel waited, letting the officer find his words. "My grandfather was a cop. My dad, too. I always believed we were the good guys." Henderson finally looked up, his eyes troubled. "But watching that body cam footage, seeing myself through someone else's eyes, I didn't like what I saw." "Recognition is the first step," Manuel said quietly. "I wanted you to know I've volunteered to help with your training program, if you'll have me." Henderson swallowed hard. "And I'm meeting with the other people who filed complaints against the department. To listen, really listen." Manuel hadn't expected this. In all his planning, all his strategizing, he hadn't anticipated genuine change happening so quickly, so personally. "That takes courage," he said finally. "Real courage." As Henderson walked away, Colonel Winters joined Manuel on the steps. "Interesting development," he observed. "Think he means it?" Manuel watched Henderson's retreating figure. "I think he wants to. And that's where it has to start." The sun was setting as they drove back to base, painting the mountains in gold and purple. Manuel looked out at the landscape he had come to call home, thinking about the bridges being built, the conversations being started. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't finished. But it was a beginning. 6 months had passed since that night on the roadside. The leaves had changed and fallen, snow had blanketed the mountains and melted away, and spring was bringing new life to the high Colorado landscape. Manuel stood at the window of the community center, watching as cars filled the parking lot outside. "Nervous?" Colonel Winters asked, joining him at the window. Manuel shook his head. "Not nervous, just reflective." Today marked the official launch of the Joint Community Training Initiative, the program that had grown from Manuel's proposal after the incident. What had started as a simple idea for better relations between the military base and local police had evolved into something much larger, with federal funding and participation from 3 neighboring towns. "You should be proud," Winters said. "This wouldn't have happened without you." Manuel turned away from the window. "It shouldn't have taken what happened to make these changes. That's the point." The large meeting room was arranged with chairs in a semicircle rather than the traditional rows. Manuel had insisted on this, no hierarchies, no barriers. The walls were lined with photographs, military personnel and police officers working side by side, community events, training sessions. 6 months of building bridges captured in images. People began filing in, police officers in uniform, military personnel, local government officials and community members. Manuel spotted Lucia Diaz, who had recorded the incident and was now heading the Civilian Oversight Committee while finishing law school. Captain Chen, who had been instrumental in drafting the legal framework for the program. And somewhat surprisingly, Officers Henderson and Reynolds had fought his suspension, claiming he was being made a scapegoat. He'd been reinstated after a 4-week unpaid leave and mandatory training, his attitude unchanged according to fellow officers. Henderson, by contrast, had become one of the program's most dedicated volunteers. "Full house," Washington remarked, coming to stand beside Manuel. The DoD civil rights official had remained involved, helping secure federal funding and providing legal guidance. "Word's getting around about what you're doing here." Manuel nodded. "Let's hope it spreads." As people took their seats, Manuel moved to the center of the semicircle. He wore his uniform, as he always did for these events, not to intimidate, but to remind everyone of the common purpose that united military and civilian service. "Good morning," he began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Thank you all for coming. Today marks not an ending, but a continuation of the work we've been doing together for the past 6 months." He looked around the circle, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "When I was detained that night, I had 2 choices. I could stay silent and move on with my life, or I could speak up. Not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been judged by the color of their skin or the sound of their name rather than the content of their character." Manuel gestured to a table where copies of the training manual were stacked, the culmination of months of collaborative work. "This program isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about recognition, education, and growth. It's about building a community where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard." He noticed Officer Henderson nodding slightly, while Reynolds sat with arms crossed, clearly still resistant. Change didn't happen overnight, Manuel had learned. Some hearts were harder to reach than others. "I'd like to invite Chief Baker to say a few words," Manuel said, stepping aside. Baker approached, looking more at ease than he had 6 months ago. The police chief had initially been defensive, worried about liability and department morale, but over time he'd become a genuine advocate for reform. When Chief Ortega first proposed this initiative, "I'll admit I was skeptical," Baker began honestly. "I saw it as an admission of failure on our part. What I've come to understand is that it's actually an opportunity for excellence." He held up a bound report. "Civilian complaints against our department are down 40% in the last quarter. Officer morale has improved. Community trust is growing. These aren't just feel-good metrics. They make us better at our jobs." As Baker continued, Manuel found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them all to this point. The painful night of his detention, the anger and humiliation he'd felt, the difficult conversations that followed. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been necessary. After the formal presentation, people broke into smaller groups for the workshops that would occupy the rest of the day. Manuel was scheduled to lead a session on communication strategies, but first, he had a personal matter to attend to. He found Henderson standing by the refreshment table, looking uncomfortable in the crowded room. "Officer," Manuel greeted him. "Glad you could make it," Henderson nodded. "Wouldn't miss it. This program, it's important. Walk with me?" Manuel suggested, gesturing toward the door. Outside, the spring air was cool and fresh. They walked in silence for a moment before Henderson spoke. "My partner still thinks I've lost my mind," he said with a rueful smile. "Buying into all this sensitivity training, as he calls it." "Reynolds?" Manuel asked, though he already knew the answer. Henderson nodded. "He doesn't get it. Doesn't want to get it. Says I've gone soft. And what do you think?" The officer stopped walking, considering the question. "I think I've started seeing things I was blind to before. And once you see them, you can't unsee them." Manuel understood exactly what he meant. It was like putting on glasses for the first time and suddenly realizing the world had details you'd been missing. "There's something I wanted to tell you," Henderson continued. "Remember Thomas Rodriguez? The mechanic who filed one of those earlier complaints against our department?" Manuel nodded. The case had been one of the 3 dismissed complaints Washington had mentioned. Rodriguez had been pulled over 9 times in 6 months without a single ticket. I went to see him at his shop. Just to talk, you know? No uniform, no badge. Just 2 people. Henderson looked down at his hands. He showed me pictures of his kids. Told me how he teaches his teenage son to keep both hands on the steering wheel if he ever gets pulled over. To say yes, sir, and no, sir, no matter what. The officer's voice grew quiet. My dad taught me to watch for brake lights and speed traps. His dad taught him to be afraid. They resumed walking, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. You're making a difference, Manuel said finally, with Rodriguez with others. That matters. Because of you, Henderson replied. If you hadn't spoken up, Manuel shook his head. It was never just about me. I was just the right person in the wrong situation at the right time to make some noise. When they returned to the community center, the workshops were in full swing. Manuel spotted Lucia Diaz leading a discussion with a mixed group of police officers and community members. Her brother, Staff Sergeant Diaz, sat proudly in the front row. In another room, Captain Chen was explaining the legal framework of civilian oversight to an attentive audience. Mayor Wilson was there too, having embraced the program as a signature achievement of his administration. Political motivations aside, his support had been valuable. Manuel's mother had flown in from New Mexico for the event. He found her chatting with Colonel Winters, likely embarrassing him with childhood stories. Mijo, she called when she saw him. Your colonel was just telling me how this whole program was your idea. So proud of my boy. Manuel hugged her, smelling the familiar scent of her perfume. Thanks for coming, Mama. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it, she patted his cheek. Your father would be proud too, you know. The thought of his father, who had endured countless indignities, without the platform to speak out that Manuel had been given, brought a lump to his throat. I know, he managed to say. As the day progressed, Manuel moved between workshops, listening more than speaking. He heard police officers sharing experiences that had shaped their perspectives. Community members expressing fears and hopes. Military personnel offering insights from their diverse backgrounds. Real conversations happening, sometimes uncomfortable, always necessary. During a break, Manuel stepped outside again, needing a moment of quiet. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink. He thought about how far they had come and how far they still had to go. Washington joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. You're a hard man to find. Everyone's looking for you in there. Manuel accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Just needed some air. I've got news, Washington said. The program's been approved for national expansion. The Secretary wants to use it as a model for military-community relations across the country. Manuel took a moment to absorb this. What had begun as a response to his personal experience was now going to reach communities everywhere. That's good news, he said finally. Washington studied him. You don't sound convinced. I am. It's just, Manuel searched for the words. I never wanted to be the face of something like this. I'm a soldier, not an activist. Sometimes life chooses our battles for us, Washington replied. The question is what we do when we find ourselves on the field. As they walked back toward the community center, Manuel could see through the windows, all those people gathered together working toward a common purpose. Police and civilians, military and local government, people of all backgrounds sharing a vision of a better community. You know what I think about most often? Manuel said suddenly. Not the handcuffs or the humiliation or the press conference. Washington waited. I think about what might have happened if that young corporal hadn't driven by and recognized me. If I hadn't had the protection of my rank and uniform. Manuel looked at his companion. For most people, there is no colonel to call. No viral video. No press conference. That's why this work matters, Washington said simply. Inside, people were gathering for the closing session. Manuel would need to speak again, to send everyone off with renewed purpose and commitment. But as he paused at the threshold looking at the diverse faces waiting inside, he already knew what truly mattered. It wasn't the program, important as it was. It wasn't the national recognition or the policy changes. It was the conversations happening in living rooms and break rooms. The father feeling a little safer when his son drove to school. The officer thinking twice before making assumptions. The small human moments of recognition and respect that no policy could mandate, but every policy should protect. That was the real change. And it was just beginning.